Hello gathered friends, I'm Brewer Nuva, and welcome to Bionicle Deep Dive, where we analyze the tropes, characters, and lore of LEGO Bionicle. In the last two videos, I talked a lot about the past of Bionicle, how both G1 and G2 ended, the story-based reasons for those endings, and what could have been avoided. In this video, I want to talk about the future of Bionicle, and explore the question of whether or not it can come back, and theorize as to what it might look like if it does. I also want to talk about the amazing things that the fandom has been doing to keep the series alive, and even growing in some cases, showing that even without LEGO, Bionicle still has a future. Let's dive right into it. I discuss a lot of things over the course of this video, so I'm going to make the crux of my thoughts here, now, and I'll explain and justify them throughout the rest of it. I do actually believe that Bionicle has the potential to come back, in theory, and could be very successful. This video is not me saying that Bionicle is definitely going to come back, or is even likely to come back. I think it's possible and feasible, but don't get your hopes up. There have been no definitive moves from LEGO. LEGO will only bring back Bionicle if they believe it can be a significant success and reach many people. This requires not only for us to maintain our fan base, but to grow it and get new people interested in the series ourselves, which is possible. My next major point is that if it does come back, it needs to avoid the pitfalls of the previous runs, which means the story needs to be compelling, accessible, and advertised well. I believe the best way to do that would be a TV show of some kind. I really think that if they make another attempt, the best way would be a TV show, though other options do exist. There's also a lot of debate about how the set should be handled, and that I will discuss as well, given how central that is to both the fans and to LEGO as a company. And the last big point I make is that I don't think we actually need LEGO to bring back Bionicle, as the things that the fan base has been able to achieve thus far, as far as artistry and community storytelling, have been phenomenal. So with all that out of the way, let's get into the meat of the discussion. Although there hasn't been any true confirmation that Bionicle would be coming back in any capacity, there have been an interesting number of moves from LEGO that have gotten the community talking. There was the 90th anniversary poll, which Bionicle fans managed to win in the opening round. While Bionicle didn't end up winning in the end, we made an impressive showing. And since then, LEGO has been talking more about Bionicle on their social media, which many fans like myself have appreciated. And of course, there's the 90 Years of Play set that included an adorable miniature Tahu as a homage to Bionicle. I love him. I love the community response to him. He's so goofy and scrunkly, and yet he generated so much creativity. If you want to see the full scope of creativity from it, check out this video from Wixel, which is wonderful. And beyond the increase in attention to Bionicle, LEGO has also been making some interesting moves in the realm of construction. While the original Bionicle system and CCBS are both out of circulation, LEGO has started making some very interesting brick-built action figures, like with the new Marvel Spider-Man builds and the Monkey King mechs, which look absolutely awesome and innovative in so many of the same ways Bionicle did. All of these things combined have gotten Bionicle fans wondering if LEGO is laying the groundwork and putting out feelers to see if another shot at a Bionicle revival is viable. They might not be. It's very possible that LEGO is just doing other things and also wanted to give Bionicle a little more recognition, which is appreciated. But with all this tentative hype, we also have to acknowledge the hesitation from both LEGO and Bionicle fans at the possibility of it coming back. If it were to return, it would need to be good, and there have been many fights online over the vast differences in opinion on what a good Bionicle return would look like. There's a loud contingent of fans who insist on their very specific version of Bionicle and won't be satisfied with anything else. Though I'd say the majority of fans would be open to something as long as the story is well written and the sets are fun. But even more than just being good, it would need to sell well enough, especially early on, to justify the financial risk. And neither of these things are certain. If we've learned anything from the past of Bionicle, it's this. The core base of original Bionicle superfans is not enough to sustain the line on its own. That's a hard pill to swallow, I know, because we are an incredibly passionate and dedicated fan base, and one of, if not the most loyal fan bases among all of LEGO. But the fact is, there simply aren't enough of us, and we don't have the spending power to sustain a whole line of toys ourselves. G1 proved this when it had trouble getting new fans later in its run, and sales dipped. Generation 2 proved it when it couldn't get a significant headway despite the hype from old fans. And numerous Bionicle LEGO Ideas projects proved it when they couldn't reach their goals before other sets with more wide appeals could. We're probably in a better state than we were before, as when G2 came out, many of us were in our late teens and early 20s and couldn't ask our parents to buy us toys and didn't have the spending power to buy them ourselves. Now, as is clear by the increase in quality of Bionicle fan projects, we are in a much better position. We've got more money, more skills, and more organization. But there still aren't enough of us original superfans to justify a new line. We are, however, enough to keep the fandom alive and the flame burning, as we've been doing for many years with no signs of stopping. And that is a critical starting point. People have often talked, especially in years past, about the need to show LEGO our passion and to make sure they know we're still here and that the Bionicle community isn't going anywhere. The thing is, though, they know. They know we're here. They know we want it back. They know the series is good. They just don't know what to do with it right now. They've got an incredible IP on their hands, but they just can't seem to figure out how to sell it right now. Over the past few years, it's felt like LEGO would occasionally peek open the lid on the Bionicle fandom to see if we're dead yet, but every time they hear us roaring from within, and now they've come to embrace that we're a significant part of the broader LEGO community. They know because they see what's been proven time and time again by the polls and by the LEGO Ideas pages. The Bionicle fandom is too large and too passionate to ignore, but also not large enough to justify the risk of a whole new line. And that's why they've taken the middle ground of including us online and giving out commemorative sets to acknowledge us without the financial risk. And if I'm being honest, I think that's the smart decision on their part. It's the good business plan given the circumstances. If Bionicle is to have a future, it needs to attract new people. For years, Bionicle fans have been trying to get the series back, but they've gone about it the wrong way. If you want Bionicle back, don't petition LEGO to revive it. Show it to your friends. Get them into it. Find people in other fandom spaces who might like it and recommend the series to them. Don't be obnoxious about it, don't be pushy, but do show how good the series is, how creative it gets with its premise, and tell them about the characters they'd want to get invested in. And, do it in a nice way. Don't do that thing many nerds have done where they act kind of superior about being into it. Gush about it, share your thoughts and theories, make jokes, show off the cool scenes and the artwork, the stuff that connects people, makes them feel included and interested. I guarantee that if we can show that Bionicle has the capacity to attract a huge, wider audience beyond just the initial fans, that will get LEGO thinking about it much more seriously. One comparison that Greg Farshtey himself made was between Bionicle and Star Trek. Star Trek, that huge media franchise that had become a cornerstone of sci-fi and nerd culture and whose community basically invented modern fandom. Yet, Star Trek, the original series, was cancelled after just 3 seasons. Just like Bionicle, it had a hugely passionate and dedicated fan base who loved it dearly, but it just didn't have the ratings from a general audience to sustain it. But the fans of the original series kept the fandom alive, enough that networks began to syndicate it. And through that, it gained an even larger following because it was available to more people, and those who saw it saw how great it was. Enough for the company to make the next generation, and the continued sequels and reboots that continue to this day. Now, I'll bet for many of you there's a worry that we might not be able to get that many people interested in the series. Because Bionicle has always felt so niche, and because the fandom has so often felt like an insular club of people who get it, I think that if we're being honest with ourselves, there have been times where most of us have worried deep down that maybe the series isn't actually that good, and it won't hold up to people who didn't grow up with it. Let me assure you right now, it is that good. New people coming to the series, even as adults, have appreciated it and fallen in love with it. People who appreciate stories for their nuance and themes and mysteries have come to see Bionicle for the gem that it is. One example is Karisu, an anime reviewer on Twitter who was convinced to check it out over the summer by Kirika, a friend of mine in the community. Karisu started off skeptical, but came to find the story was incredibly moving and compelling. And he was just one of several people online who I personally have talked to about getting into the series. Bionicle has a future, regardless of whether or not LEGO actually picks it back up again. The series does have a fan base that has the capacity to grow. And this is why, as I said before, fan projects like Wall of History and Biological Chronicle have been so important. I have seen myself that having these available has made recommending the series to new people so much easier. And I've seen an influx of new fans who are drawn to the depth of the series and the passion of the fan base. These resources really are relatively new if we think about it, and I honestly believe that we have not yet seen the massive growth potential that making the series easily available will bring. If we continue to show our passion, not to LEGO, who already knows, but to the wider world of potential Bionicle fans, I think we'll see even more gathered friends join our ranks. So on to the next important question. Should Bionicle come back? And my honest answer to that is yes, but it doesn't have to. At least in an official capacity. Yes, because the series is incredibly good, and there is still a tremendous amount of untapped potential within its story. But it doesn't have to, because the story did get its completion. Bionicle was amazing, and in many ways it stuck the landing, especially in G1. True, a few story series were unfinished, but those were epilogue side story type material. The true main story finished with Journey's End, and it may have been a little rushed at places, but god damn it did it stick the landing. It's okay for stories to be finished, and for there to not be much more official content to come from it, because we can keep it alive through retelling it, and loving it and talking about it among us fans, and I'm at peace with that. But that doesn't mean I still wouldn't love to see something new come from Bionicle, and I'm sure there's plenty of you who also think that. In this age of remakes and reboots, everything old is new again. There's a lot of criticism to be had about that, a lot of which I agree with, but there's no sign of it stopping anytime soon. If we're going to keep reviving old stories, I think Bionicle deserves another turn. It's still an incredibly unique and yet also timeless story about heroes and legends, set in one of the most creative fictional settings I've ever encountered. So, if it does come back, let's talk about how. So, the biggest questions about any Bionicle revival are, how should the toys be handled? Who should it be marketed to? And what story should the revival tell, and how? Let's start with the toys, since they are LEGO's bottom line. What building system should they use? Bionicle toys have traditionally been constructible action figures, known as Construction within the LEGO community. Bionicle was one of the very first construction themes LEGO put out, and certainly one of the biggest, coming to define the genre for LEGO for years to come. Many fans would want to see Bionicle return as a construction theme. Now, something needs to be clear to those Bionicle fans that insist that only the original Bionicle construction system is true Bionicle. Those parts are never coming back into production. We're not getting those old sets back. At least not like this. And we have every right to feel sad about that. We can grieve that fact. I know that the original style of building mattered to a lot of old fans and was a huge factor in what made it special to them. But at the end of the day, it's something that we have to accept. LEGO destroys the molds of old parts after they've been out of circulation for a few years. They do this to make room for new molds in their production facilities. By this point, not only would the original Bionicle part molds be gone, it's very likely that the CCBS molds are gone too, meaning that going forward, LEGO Bionicle would have to be something else. But there are other possibilities that are still exciting. Yes, Bionicle was incredibly unique and creative, but there are so many other unique and creative ways to go about it. If you say, oh, let it stay dead because they're never going to do what the original did, then you're closing off the possibility of something beautiful. We've seen with the new LEGO Spider-Man figures, as well as several of the mech-type sets for Ninjago, Monkey Kid, and Marvel, that LEGO is putting real effort into brick-based construction figures. I personally really like these. They're very creative and manage to achieve many of the strengths of the older construction systems, such as posability and customization. These look like fantastic toys, and the building and parts techniques used in them carry the same spirit of innovation and imagination that the original Bionicle toys had when they first came out. Seriously, give these things a chance. They look so fun. They're posable, customizable, and imagination-stirring, just like Bionicle always was. To the people who turn up their nose at the idea, you can't praise Bionicle for being innovative and groundbreaking, and then turn around and refuse to try new things just because they aren't the same old things you were used to. Now, some have argued that Technic is a better candidate than the traditional brick system, and I can see where they're coming from. It's a very distinct building system that is very good at achieving a mechanical aesthetic. Plus, Bionicle was originally a LEGO Technic subtheme, so that could be seen as returning to its roots. Many of the G1 sets, particularly the large Titan sets, made heavy use of Technic pieces, with the 2001 Rahi being large beasts almost purely made out of Technic. I think that this is an interesting possibility, and there's a real chance that Technic could be a great way to achieve construction. There's also the possibility that LEGO could consider creating a new construction system that would attempt to fill the gap left by the original G1 system and CCBS. They could, in theory, attempt to make a brand new parts and system that could try to overcome the limitations of its predecessors. However, I see this as by far the least likely option, at least for the foreseeable future. It would be a pretty huge gamble to do that, especially when it seems like they're more focused on achieving construction with system bricks. They could also make Bionicle not a construction theme at all, and instead of having the sets be large action figures of the characters, have the characters be minifigures and the sets be buildings, environments, or vehicles. This is the route of most of LEGO's traditional builds, like Ninjago, Star Wars, City, and Castle, and plenty others. Technically, Bionicle already tried this in G1 for about 3 years, and the total success of those can be debated, though I definitely had tons of fun with the ones I got, I can tell you that. The characters would be less detailed, but it would open up the possibility to explore Bionicle's amazing locations as sets. Some people believe that this would go too far away from the original spirit of Bionicle, and the artistry of how they built their action figures. Others are all on board with the idea of a brick-built G3. And TTV, in particular, have made their own fan mock sets of what an entirely brick-built G3 would look like. Personally, I'm of the opinion that Bionicle is Bionicle, no matter what form the sets take, and that what it takes to get me hooked is a compelling Bionicle story and world. I'd definitely be curious to see a system-build Bionicle playset in the future. There is another possibility that we should consider, at least for the sake of hypotheticals, since, after all, everything here is pure speculation. That possibility to consider is, should there be sets at all, or should they try to make Bionicle media purely as a story? And before you say it, yes, I know it's heresy. The toys were a hugely integral part of what made Bionicle amazing and unique, and anyways, LEGO is a toy company through and through. It's just something to think about. Since Bionicle had such a heavily focused and developed story, it's not unreasonable to ask if it could stand on its own as a story media. Much like Transformers and My Little Pony have managed to attract huge audiences to their stories far beyond the toy market. I also propose this possibility because I think it would be one of the only ways to get a fully faithful G1 retelling, which is a personal fantasy of mine. I'd love to see the story redone, perhaps as a TV show, though I'll get into that more later when I move from the toys to the story. But if LEGO ever were to reboot the toys, they would never just re-release all the old sets, since, again, the molds were destroyed. And I'm not sure they'd want to make a complete redoing of the old cast as they were, just with new parts. Even if a revival followed the original story more closely, I think they'd want to make a new story simply to justify new sets. But given the amount of high-quality media they produce with the LEGO movies, Ninjago, and Monkey Kid, LEGO could, in theory, decide to make a purely media project and retell G1, or any version of the story, in a widely accessible, big-budget way. Do you think that they will? No. LEGO's toys are literally their whole identity. I don't think they'd make something like that if they weren't making toys to go with it. Plus, again, the toys are awesome. I'd love to actually see new Bionicle figures. But so, those are the questions that we have about the sets. The next important question is, who should it be marketed to? One potential option to consider is for LEGO to market Bionicle primarily to adults. And this could be an interesting option. Recent studies have shown that adults who buy toys for themselves have become one of the biggest areas of growth in the toy market. According to one report, adult toy buyers accounted for 1/4 of all sales and 60% of the growth. Adult figurine collectors are already a huge market. Probably the closest comparison to Bionicle would be Gundam, which sports a wide array of complex buildable action figures based on its line that are mostly marketed to adults. And even without that data, it's clear LEGO has already been making moves to capitalize on the adult market. While adult fans of LEGOs, or AFFLs as they are sometimes called, have been a significant part of their market for years, recently it seems that LEGO has been doubling down on that, with tons of sets that are clearly designed and marketed to much more mature audiences. Sets like the Black Panther bust, large intricate building sets based on historical locations, and even Lego artworks and plants for decoration. All these are clearly aren't meant for kids, but for adults, given that they're much more A, complex, B, expensive, and they're not really about play in the same way that children do. Now, not only has LEGO been expanding its adult-centered sets, but as clear by the amount of licensed sets from Star Wars, Marvel, DC, and others, as well as their investment in Monkey Kid and Ninjago, that LEGO is making much more use of story and IP-based materials. And if they wanted to lean into a story-centered theme that was maybe for adults, that they wouldn't have to license, Bionicle is a perfect candidate. The story already has the darkest and most mature setting LEGO has ever produced, so it has that capacity to be a much more adult theme, which could be interesting to explore. Now, should a Bionicle revival be primarily focused towards adults? I'm not sure, actually. While it definitely could work, I also think that Bionicle being a kid's toy had a lot of charm to it. The fantastical action-adventure story is very attractive to kids, and could still do well among them if given the proper marketing and direction. Bionicle proved with G1 that it is capable of being a storyline for kids that could still be appreciated by an older audience, and it did so by never talking down to the kids who followed it, and trusting them to appreciate its depth. These days, there are tons of kids shows and media that have large adult fandoms, while still being mainly for kids for the same reason. They have maturity and depth while also being colorful and goofy. Because a good story is a good story, regardless of age demographic. So if you want my opinion, if Bionicle is brought back, I do think it should primarily be a kid's toy, but it should also have adult appeal. And LEGO has already proven that they can do that with their modern storytelling, as there are tons of adults who love Ninjago, Monkey Kid, and the various LEGO movies. And so finally, this leads us to our last question, and the one that I'm personally most invested in. What should the story be, and how should it be told? The first and most important thing is that no matter what story is told, it needs to avoid the pitfalls of the previous generations. And that means it needs to be extremely captivating and also very accessible to a wider audience. Making the series captivating is about ensuring quality writing and making sure that the story has the right amount of depth and intrigue. As far as accessibility, the story needs to be presented in the right format. And as I said in the beginning, I think the best possible way to do that would be a TV series. Just like Ninjago and Monkey Kid, a TV series gets the story out there to a wide audience, and having a single central format allows fans who come in later an easy and obvious way to catch up with the main story. Now, on the actual story that's told, there's a lot of debate and differing opinions on what people want to see in a revival. Some people say it should be a continuation of the G1 storyline, continuing after the original ended. Others have suggested a continuation of G2's storyline, returning to the island of Okoto and finishing up the ending to the final arc that was hinted at but we never saw. Many would like a straight-up retelling of the G1 story from the beginning, essentially a second draft to smooth it out and make it more widely accessible. And a lot of people propose that a Bionicle revival should have its own original story, a Generation 3. Maybe it could take heavy inspiration from the previous two generations, but would also go its own direction. I'll do my best to analyze each of these possibilities, the pros and cons of them, and the theoretical likelihood of LEGO choosing to go down one of these paths. I'll start with the continuations. Now, I can really see why some fans would want these, as both series had somewhat rushed endings with a few unresolved plot threads. G1 in particular had the story serials that Greg Farshchi continued to write after the ending, but eventually had to drop because life got in the way. However, I just don't think picking up where they left off is a viable solution. First, the series were really side stories. Good side stories, but the actual main Bionicle plot had already wrapped up, and I'd say fairly nicely. Journey's End is kind of slept on as a finale. They would have to come up with a lot of extra stories to justify the continuation. And more importantly, it would still have the age-old problem of being inaccessible to new fans, as only the old fans would be caught up enough to appreciate it. Some have argued that perhaps a distant future continuation would work, since there wouldn't be as much to catch up on. But at that point, you might as well just make a G3, since that's how much how far you'd have to go to make a clean slate for newer fans. And a similar problem exists for G2. There would be a lot to catch up on. If you wanted to tell these stories of what happened after the original ending, it would probably be better to just retell the whole story from the beginning, and then just keep going past where the original ended. That leads us to the next possibility, a full retelling of the old stories, in a new updated format. This could look like a remake of G1 as an animated TV series, giving the whole story a brand new shine. Perhaps one that gives more moments and depth to the characters, smooths over some of the plot holes, and provides even deeper foreshadowing with the benefit of hindsight. There are some reasons why LEGO might not want to do this. They might want to make their own new stories and not be burdened by the expectations of the original. But there are also those who say that a full G1 retelling couldn't work, and I'd like to make a few arguments to the contrary. Retelling an old story as is with relatively few changes does have a strong precedent of success, particularly when we look at Japanese anime. Many anime series are animated retellings of a manga comic, and I've never heard them referred to as, oh, just a soulless remake, especially when it's actually done well. In fact, staying true to the source material is an extremely important quality for many fans. There's artistic merit in translating a story into a different medium, especially if it adds something. Mainly, what it adds is animation, voice acting, music, and just the ability to have different kinds of story beats, but still the core of the story is the same. Heck, even redoing an existing anime with slight tweaks has a precedent for doing well. The best example in this, in my opinion, would be Dragon Ball Z Kai, which was just a remastered, redubbed, and re-edited take on the original Dragon Ball Z anime. They cleaned up some of the visuals, but kept nearly all the animation the same. It did make large edits, but mostly to remove much of DBZ's infamous filler, and make it better paced and closer to the manga. And it seemed to be very successful, and may have partially paved the way for the recent Dragon Ball renaissance with all the recent Dragon Ball stories we've been getting. Some argue that because G1 already had its twist at the reveal of Masanui's true form, that a retelling wouldn't be able to do that, because people would already know, and it wouldn't have the shock value. I disagree with this for a few reasons. 1. It's been shown that even if the original is out there, retelling old plot twists to new fans can still have an impact because a large portion wouldn't have read ahead. The amount of anime-onlys who are blown away by reveals that came out in the manga months or years early is proof to that. And 2, and I think this is even more important, even if they did read ahead and were spoiled, the reveal can still be incredibly powerful. And that's because well-written plot twists can be known in advance and still be satisfying. In fact, if the twist relies solely on shock value and being told ahead of time completely ruins it, it wasn't that good a reveal anyways. The massive amount of reread value that Bionicle has, especially for me and other old fans, looking at the intricate foreshadowing that hinted at the reveal, proves to me that knowing ahead of time doesn't ruin it, but can actually enhance it. Being able to see the threads of foreshadowing as they build to a reveal is very fun. Plus, a reveal can be impactful based on how it impacts the characters. Even if we, the audience, know, the characters might not, and how the reveal affects them can be good storytelling. This is the essence of dramatic irony. Having things that the characters know that we do is a powerful storytelling tool. Take Star Wars, for example. When I first saw The Empire Strikes Back, that movie had been out for decades. I went into it knowing full well that Darth Vader was Luke's father, as does pretty much every new Star Wars fan these days. But that doesn't mean the I am your father scene didn't shake me to my core with how dramatically well executed it was, and how incredibly impactful this reveal was to Luke as a character. So, what if Bionicle went that route? I believe a retelling of G1 in a high-quality animated series could perform very well, which would get people hyped about the series again and satisfy old fans. Maybe after it's done, maybe LEGO could use what they've learned from that series to make a new G3 line with a more original plot and characters, and make a new toy line specifically for G3. That would involve temporarily making a product that is not directly tied to the toys LEGO is currently selling, which does go completely against their current business model, so it's unlikely. But it is a strategy and a possibility that could work out for them, and would definitely make me and definitely a ton of other fans happy. Though, we might not necessarily need to wait for LEGO for that. There's a fan project known as Bionicle Iliad that is attempting to make their own version of this, which looks amazing. I'll talk about them more at the end of the video when I go over what the fans are doing. With all that considered, I would say that a G3 reboot retelling is the most likely way we'll see Bionicle returning, if it ever does. Though, hopefully, it would be more spiritually faithful to the original. There have been tons of proposed G3 concepts, ranging from distant future continuations to completely new stories with new characters and locations set in the theme. There are still an incredible amount of creating and captivating stories that can still be told with the concepts of Bionicle, whether that be within the scope of the original canon or with entirely new stories or even new worlds rooted in the core premises of the story. You could explore the characters in new or deeper ways, or introduce brand new characters who explore the setting. You could expand upon the setting itself, have it be set on different islands, different worlds. Heck, just earlier this month, I chatted with Kirika, a friend of mine in the Bionicle community, and we went back and forth for like an hour, just coming up with new ways to spin the Great Spirit Robot alone. And like, all of them were bangers. Like, what if the giant robot was truly dead and they were living in its ruins mixed within the natural world? Like, how would that play out? What if the giant robot had a different purpose, like being a Noah's Ark type thing? Or what if it was made for war? What if there were more giant robots out there in the cosmos? And just all of these ideas placed in like, how do the characters that live inside the Great Spirit Robot respond to this, respond to these new paradigms? All this to say, Bionicle is nowhere near tapped out of potential ideas. There are so many other stories out there that have gotten incredible tellings and retellings just based off of the execution of ideas that are super common. You know, just retelling the old version in just a slightly better executed way. So, if executed well, Bionicle's treasure trove of unique ideas is an absolute goldmine of compelling stories. Even if it doesn't follow the same plot points, I hope that the themes remain. The themes of blending technology, nature, and mysticism. Of robots who became people and mythologized their own origins. The themes of legendary heroes who struggle with doing what's right and come together for the sake of their people. Of mystery and ancient secrets to an alien world. And potentially even a giant robot body. And of badass cyborgs doing backflips and shooting lasers. If a revival can do all that, it has everything it needs to be great. So, should Bionicle come back? Again, yes, the story is one of the most unique out there, and there's still so much potential left in exploring it. Will it come back, though? That's much trickier. It could, if handled well, be very successful, but it also could be mismanaged and bombed. LEGO's been giving Bionicle a lot more recognition these days, and it's clear there are people in the company who love it and want to honor it. But at the same time, it's a major risk, one that they won't take unless they're sure it can be profitable. I'm still willing to hold out hope, but I'm not attached to that hope. And the reason why I'm not super attached to LEGO bringing Bionicle back is because I'd say it already is making a comeback. Not driven by the company, but by the fans. I've noticed over the last few years a subtle yet palpable increase in the activity in the Bionicle fandom, and a significantly more creative one at that. As the original fans have gotten older and developed new skills, the output from the creative side of the fandom has been tremendous. The last two Bionicle Day celebrations have been vibrant 2-day-long events bursting with creativity. The TTV Canon contests and the Duckbreck Faning contests have drawn out large swaths of the mocking community, who have only gotten more creative and inspiring with their work. Several high-quality, large-scale artistic projects are already in the works. The fan-made video games of Masks of Power and Quest for Matsunui both look amazing. In the field of animated storytelling, there's Bionicle Iliad, which essentially seeks to make a 3D retelling of the Bionicle story, which is what I've always wanted, and it looks amazing. There's also the Mangai Project, a series of 2D animated shorts coming out to tell an anthology of stories around the Toho Mangai. Definitely go check all of these out and support each of these projects, as not only are the people making it passionate fans, but also incredibly skilled and dedicated storytellers. There's also other fan activity that has gotten me hopeful for the future. Mask of Destiny, which is developed from a fan news site into a massive conglomeration of passionate Bionicle fan projects, has several initiatives to both preserve the Bionicle legend as is, but to continue it in a fan-led way. Wall of History, which puts the entire Bionicle story into a single customizable reading order. Spirit Forge seeks to produce 3D printed versions of both old Bionicle parts and their own original pieces that are compatible with the sets. And of course, there's the Myths and Legacy Project, which seeks to bring together fanfiction writers for the purpose of creating new canon-compliant Bionicle stories and explore the gaps left by the original. This very channel, Aurora Nuva, is my love letter to the series, analyzing and exploring the wonderful depth for old fans and potential new fans to appreciate. All that to say, the community is already doing so much of what we could hope LEGO would do with a revival, and sometimes even more. This is essentially what Christian Faber, who was one of the lead concept artists for the original, was really talking about with his Biovival posts. He wasn't hinting at a reboot that he was making, he was trying to inspire us to make our own stories and to take the Bionicle story in our own hands. He wasn't super clear about this at times, because he tends to speak in a very metaphorical, abstract, philosophical way, but the essence of his point was that we, the community, have the power to create the stories that inspire us. We don't have to wait for an official canon dictated by a corporation on high. Our stories, our art, can be just as good and meaningful. And continuing to show our passion and making the great things that we do is a great way not only to show LEGO, but tons of other people who might fall in love with the series, and that this toy line turned modern mythology is truly something to celebrate. There is still tremendous amount of potential in the Bionicle story, whether LEGO utilizes it or not, and the fans will continue to see to that. We'll keep making our art and writing our stories and analyses and showing it proudly to new fans and gushing about it to old. I, for one, believe that the future of the Bionicle is bright, and I can't wait to see what happens. But those are my thoughts on the future of Bionicle, examining whether or not it could come back, speculating on what it might look like, and exploring the many ways the fandom itself has been keeping the legend going. But now I put it to you. What do you guys think? Do you want Bionicle to return in an official capacity, or should it stay a fond memory? What form would you want it to return in? And what are your thoughts on the numerous fan projects that are continuing to gain momentum? Let me know down in the comments, and I'll see you guys soon. Take care, my gathered friends.